Tuesday, December 27th, 2016, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I like to talk about World War I, the Gold Confiscation Act of 1933, the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, and the Liberty Bonds, which was how the U.S. government financed World War I. And the reason why I'm looking into this is that I watched the other day an audiobook, which I'll put the link above in the cards and in the description, called War is a Racket by Major General Smedley Butler. And Smedley Butler, he was a U.S. Marine Corps Major General, which was the highest rank authorized at the time. Fought in the Spanish-American War, 1898, fought in Central America, the Fruit Wars. But by the time he retired in 1930, he'd realized that the major beneficiaries of war were the major corporations and the major banks. And he explains exactly how much profit these companies made during the war and how astronomical they were compared to prior to the war. And he goes on to point out that they actually made really good profits before the war. So it was all very greedy, of course. And he basically realized that war is a racket, and the people who benefit are the very rich people who have, the major shareholdings in the companies that supply Uncle Sam with munitions and everything necessary during war. And he also gives specific examples of how Uncle Sam paid a lot more than it should have. And so how, the taxpayer was screwed, not only because, a lot of young people died, but they were screwed because, they were basically robbed by these people. So Smedley Butler, really interesting. And with that, I wanted to look at the Liberty Bonds, which was what was used to finance this war. And I read here from Wikipedia. It says a Liberty Bond was a war bond that was sold in the United States to support the Allied cause in World War I. Subscribing to the bonds became a symbol of patriotic duty in the United States and introduced the idea of financial securities to many citizens for the first time. And it says the Act of Congress, which authorized the Liberty Bonds, is still used today as the authority under which all U.S. Treasury bonds are issued. So very interesting that this crisis was not wasted, as Rahm Emanuel said. It's you should never let a crisis go to waste. They killed so many birds with one stone in this crisis. They got the public to get interested in securities and bonds. They financed the war. They helped the very rich get even richer, and they also made sure that the U.S. government now, or the Treasury in that case, had the power to issue debt, as much debt as they wanted. And they only were able to do that because they were at war. So I'll read here a little bit about these Liberty Bonds. In the beginning, in 1917 through 1918, they didn't do very well. The issues were bought below par, so the interest the government had to pay was quite high. They didn't get enough money, so they had to do a PR exercise. Public, propaganda. Basically, the government, they used even Charlie Chaplin, and they used other famous people to try to drum up public support, and they did. And they issued quite a lot. In 1917, in April, they issued $5 billion. That was the first issue. October 1st, 1917, they issued another $3 billion. April 5th, 1918, they issued another $3 billion. And then the fourth Liberty loan was $6 billion in September 1918. And the other thing that they say here, and I'll read, it says peak U.S. indebtedness was in August 1919 at a value of $25.5 billion for Liberty bonds, victory notes, war savings certificates, and other government securities. As early as 1922, the possibility that the war debt could not be paid in full within the expected schedule was raised, and that rescheduling may be needed. In 1921, the Treasury Department began issuing short-term notes maturing 3 to 5 years to repay the victory loan. So what they had to do then was the U.S. Treasury just started issuing new debt to pay the old debt, all this war debt that they couldn't afford to pay. The U.S. only had they had $30 billion in debt, and they only had $970 million in federal expenditures. So huge debt, and they couldn't pay it off. So I guess the fact that now the Treasury could issue debt kept it going. And the reason I'm talking about the Gold Confiscation Act and the Gold Reserve Act is that all this debt was gold-based. So you were supposed to get, you're supposed to be able to get gold, if you redeemed your, these war or liberty bonds. But there was a default. And most people think, oh, the U.S. government has never defaulted. But that's rubbish. They defaulted on the Liberty bonds. Those bonds that were supposed to be, your patriotic duty to help the government finance the war, to keep the world safe for democracy, to finance the war to end all wars. More like to finance the war to make the industrialists even richer, right? So I read here, default of the fourth Liberty bond. And it says the first 3 Liberty bonds and the victory loan were retired during the course of the 1920s. However, because the terms of the bonds allowed them to be traded for the later bonds, which had superior terms, most of the debt from the first, second, and third Liberty bonds was rolled into the fourth issue. As a result, the large majority of Liberty bond debt was still outstanding in the 1930s. The fourth Liberty bond had the following terms. Date of bond, October 24th, 1918. Coupon rate, 4.25%. Callable starting October 15th, 1933. Maturity date, October 15th, 1938. Amount originally tendered, $6 billion. Amount sold, $7 billion. So, and I continue here, it says, the terms of the bond included, and I quote, the principal and interest hereof are payable in the United States gold coin of the present standard of value. Note that they put the present standard of value. Did they know something that maybe in the future they're going to change that standard of value? I think they did. This type of gold clause was common in both public and private contracts of the time and was intended to guarantee that bondholders would not be harmed by a devaluation of the currency. However, when the U.S. Treasury called the fourth bond on April 15, 1934, it defaulted on this term by refusing to redeem the bond in gold, and neither did it account for the devaluation of the dollar from $20.67 per troy ounce of gold, the 1918 standard of value, to $35 per ounce, the 1934 standard of value. The 21 million bond holders therefore lost 139 million troy ounces of gold, or approximately 41% of the bond's principal. This was equivalent of $2.86 billion in 1918 dollars, or $220 billion at 2012 price of $1,600 dollars per ounce. I guess now it's a bit less because gold's come down. But it just goes to show you, not only did they, they changed the standard of the coin. The coin now was worth 35 instead of $20.67. But they also basically took out, you got no gold at all, not even at 35, dollars an ounce. So what a scam. Who benefited from this? Well, the government, I guess. They didn't have to pay as much, but the very rich, of course, because they got all their profits during the war. They became immensely even wealthier through the war profits. They were probably told ahead of time of the Gold Confiscation Act, the Gold Reserve Act, and they probably moved a lot of their money abroad, probably to places like Switzerland. So they were protected. The people who got screwed are the people, the same kind of people whose sons or grandsons or brothers, died during the war. They're the same people, the common people who helped finance the war. They were screwed out also when, they're supposed to get paid back. They got paid back in paper instead of gold. So, and what's the moral of the story? Well, the moral of the story is that, yeah, war is a racket, and Major General Smedley Butler was very right, and it still is. He wrote and talked about this in the 1930s. I think he died in 1940, and nothing has changed. We're still people's emotions are still exploited. The divisions, you have to be patriotic. We have to do this. You have to defend the United States. We have to defend democracy in Europe. We have to defend our freedom. I think I agree with him. It's just a scam. It's just a big war is great business. It's the best business. And a lot of times, like Smedley Butler says in his book, and I recommend you listen to it or buy the book. A lot of the people who benefit from all this expenditure of war, which is forced by the government, and they use fear, to get the powers to be able to do that, to commandeer and get the money to do this. And yeah, the people who benefit, they get richer, and then the public, the young public get killed in the war or maimed or injured for life, but they also get raped financially, and they also get encouraged into new habits like securitization, buying securities to help finance a patriotic war, to fight the Germans, the horrible Germans. During World War I, they said they were killing babies, and all these stories they had. So there you go. But I think personally then, it was probably a manufactured crisis, because the United States, the Great Depression, the stock market bubble in the 20s, probably done on purpose. Basically, it gave an excuse for the U.S. government to default and go off the gold standard domestically, screw the investors, which was the public, and the people who benefited again were the insiders, of course, who knew this was going to happen, like Joseph Kennedy, JFK's dad, who went short on Wall Street and made a fortune. He was, I think, ambassador to London from the U.S., so he was an insider. So nothing ever changes. What do I think this has to do with today? I'm not saying we're in the exact same boat, but my advice to people is be wary when people say it's your patriotic duty to do this and this. Follow the money. Think about cui bono, or, which is Latin for who benefits. And then you'll be okay. Of course, a lot of times there's a lot of public pressure on people. They say, oh, you're unpatriotic, you're a German sympathizer, or you're a Russian sympathizer now because you don't want to, help finance a war. But yeah, that's it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it far and wide, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. If you'd like to donate to my channel, there's some links below in the description. I accept Bitcoin, BitGold. I've got PayPal account and a Patreon account. I'll talk to you later. Take care.